City Muga, please tell the good prof today's proverb.
I will. Our proverb is from the country of Sierra Leone. Quarrels end. Words once spoken never die.
Words once spoken
Never die.
never die.
Yes.
Quarrels-
But quarrels end. But words once spoken never die.
Never die. So is this the same as saying that words are like arrows? The moment they leave the bow, they don't come back.
No, they don't.
Okay.
That's why when people speak in Kiswahili, say this person amenishikilia maneno. Yes.
Amenishikilia maneno.
Yes. The things I've said, they have held on to the words I have said.
Ameshikilia
The issue is over,
Lakini.
but the things you said,
Remember.
yes.
ameshikilia maneno. You can forget, but not forgive. Is that the same?
There's that little detail, yes.
The
Because,
other way around.
yes.
The other way around. You can
Forgive,
Give,
but you
you can
don't
forgive,
forget.
but you don't forget.
Yes.
That's the same, eh? Wow.
Prof, welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Thank you, Muga.
Always a pleasure to have you here. Now, you've been to this country of Sierra Leone.
Yes, I have been there.
You've done some work there.
Yes, actually, it was one of the few countries I landed when I was a young man by plane, traveling by plane. I moved from Nairobi to Addis Ababa, Jemena, and there's that Ethiopian Airlines. You keep on
You
like
hop.
matatu,
You're
you hop.
hopping like
hop.
oui.
Sierra Leone is the first place I saw people getting into a plane. That time there was a plane called Air Afrique, which was like a matatu. You don't buy a seat.
It wasn't like a matatu, prof. It was a matatu.
It was a matatu.
Yes.
you don't buy.
You don't buy a ticket. You scramble for the seat.
Meaning, you buy a ticket, then you move
No.
yako itakuwa
You
poa.
enter the plane.
Yes.
Alafu makanga anakuja kichukua.
Akichukua na pia anakuonyesha pale utakaa. So a lady came and tucked herself under my feet with a baby and said, usiseme niko hapa in French. Then I could not hear it. Then because I was not speaking French, but the neighbor told me. So we that. So it was.
She hid under your seat.
Yes, here under the
And the entire
seat.
duration of the flight.
With a baby.
No, we eventually
After-
said no, because you have to have the belt. Therefore, finally, those who have not gotten seat then are moved out. But I'm told every seat, including the one of the passenger, whatever the pilots and whoever, except the pilots. Every other seat is fair game. Every other seat is fair game except the one of the pilot. So that's my initial memory of Sierra Leone. Those are the chaotic times when things were not really good. The other one, of course, they used the Kenyan military going to prevent when it was said that you had to choose whether you want the full arm or half.
Yeah.
For the
The sleeve.
the short sleeve or long sleeve. That was the choice. That was really very ugly.
It was.
Then finally, Sierra Leone come back.
Sierra Leone has made some great strides. I mean, looking at a war that was internal, external conflict was terrible.
Now they have done very well.
Very well.
They are doing extremely well, including the trade, and even if you see the construction that is going on in that country, it's amazing. Yeah.
Then that just segues into our conversation, which is when does war end? When does development begin? In our context, when do elections end? When does governing and development begin? Now, we have been treated by these people called politicians, where you also want to belong, to some unending circus of politics and campaigning. In the last term, the argument was that no sooner had a president been sworn in and members of parliament taken oath of office and governors and MCAs than they had started their campaigns for 2022. Now again, this time, there are rumblings that are we starting the 2027 campaigns already? Are we seeing that, people have just gotten into parliament, hata wajakula mshahara ya miezi tatu, hata waja apply grant ya gari na mortgage, and they're already campaigning for 2027. Are we there, Prof?
Well, let's see. It is important to notice the times in which we live. One of the assistants to I think it was Nixon, President Nixon, the U.S., was worried about what was happening when the TV and the radio came. And he said, "Sir, we have entered the era of perpetual campaigns. When you have to defend yourself more when you're in office to protect your office than possibly when you are campaigning. What that means is that we have flattened the plane between what we used to call the campaign time and governing time. Campaign time in the US would be 1 year and 3 years of governing. In Kenya, it would be 1 year of campaign and 4 years of governing. And that's how the issue of development versus politics came in. That 1 year is for politics, hard tackling. 1 year, for 4 years is to fulfill the promises that you gave in your manifesto. Social media has not helped the situation now. It is even more because every morning you wake up with a tweet, the Trump style. Now, so every minute, it's not even every day, every minute is a campaign minute. And the moment you do that, you don't do that, you're left behind. So perpetual or permanent campaign, because that's what they are calling it in political science now, it has already entered our classroom. We are teaching it in schools. The perpetual or permanent campaign, it has become the order of the day. And therefore, the moment you are elected and you are sworn in, you say, you don't know whether you are saying I will serve or I will start the campaign. You're not sure. Because if you don't start immediately, then you're in trouble.
Then you won't even serve.
And that was even emphasized by the victory of William Ruto. If Ruto did not have the Tanga, which was basically endless movement, that's how the former president Uhuru Kenyatta ridiculed it, that you're moving all around instead of settling down and doing development. He was among the first persons to complain about perpetual campaign in the country. If you look at Raila Odinga, he has been permanently on campaign throughout. And and the only person who was trying to think differently was Uhuru Kenyatta, but he paid for it. So, except we are in the era of permanent campaigns.
So this is who we are now.
Yeah, and don't even complain, because if you complain, if the British continue to complain about their weather and do away with the umbrella, they're in trouble. They have only themselves to blame.
How should it be? We're talking about permanent campaigns. People are talking about promises and what they want to do. Should they? So now, are we saying that even the government of the day is in campaign mode still?
It is started. I said before you say, my dear, before you say, Peter Kagwanja. By that time, you don't know whether to say you will serve or you will campaign, because it is inevitable that if you don't campaign, you are going to be decampaigned. And therefore, you've got to make the choice whether you want to campaign or be decampaigned.
Okay.
This is what the assistant to Nixon was telling him.
So where does the choice of the people then come in when it comes to development and things that ought to be done as a result of these pre-appointment promises? The people waiting with bated breath about what ought to happen when said person, it doesn't matter at what level, from your ward representative all the way to your president, who said that they would do certain things in order for you to vote them into office, n'est-ce pas? Now, this person is there, and we're saying they're still campaigning. So what happens to these millions of people who are hoping that something actually gets done?
Well, I don't think it says a stack as such, that it is either campaign or development. It's not a stack as such. During the time of Uhuru Kenyatta, those of us who had the little privilege to pen something and say what need to be done about this, because we saw it's a problem. The fact that we're discussing it here, it's a serious problem. And if you go permanently on a campaign mode without focusing on development, then you have basically undermined the mandate that brought you to the office. And therefore, in thinking, we thought it is possible to do the same at the two at the same time. But then what do you call that? So we came up with the idea of development as politics. So there is politics, and then you move to development as politics. When you talk about development and politics, what you are saying is that every moment you go, you do politics, but it has to be for development. Now, what is not happening is that most politicians have not transisted into development as politics mode. Take, for example, We have the problem of GMO as an issue that we're discussing. What should a politician who want to go into this development as politics, so that you achieve development at the same time you achieve bonga point for politics, because this is what every politician is looking for, the bonga points. So how do you get those bonga points? If I was a leader of opposition, like now, I would have come up with what you can call a shadow white paper on what GMO is, what it is not, what harm it is going to cause. And you go to the public, you come to Spice, you go everywhere and say, this is what facing Kenyans. I would not be calling for demonstrations now. I would be
You'll be very academic about it.
Not academic. I would be saying it is not GMO which is a problem. It is the pesticides that it brings and the pest and all that thing and the cancer that, the sprays and all required by it will bring into your lives. That would perhaps be my line. It's not academic. It is being, because if you remember what Socrates, among the founders of democracy, was saying, it's a choice between the candy seller and what do you call the tooth doctor,
The dentist.
Now the dentist will always lose the contest because he give you pain by removing your teeth, but the candy seller will always make your life sweet throughout. So the sweet tongue versus the reality. This is what we're facing.
But then what I'm hearing you say, Prof, is you're saying that even the person in the opposition should come with reality. Because when you come with a white paper, you're basically coming with this reality that's packaged in a very, very scientific way. How about just tagging to people's emotions? Surely nyinyi watu wa bishop mnataka mimi nikule GMO kuanzia kesho, surely. That is sensational. When you hear Kalonzo Musyoka say that, you're like, enyewe hapana.
No, I hear you. What I am saying is, in a democracy, what works is knowledge. Even when you are telling a lie, you have to quote it with some truth. And that's what we are not saying. Being more systematic, more programmatic about things. And this is why the hustlers were ahead of everyone, because they tagged to things that were real. COVID-19 dismantled our economy, destroyed our economy, domestically and otherwise. If that was an impact. Before that, there were locusts. After that, it's Ukraine. So the economy was completely destroyed. Now, how do you ride on that? The impact of that economic destruction. So you say they are hustlers, which is true, because wars produce hustlers, famines produce hustlers. Every destruction of the economy produces hustlers. Then you mobilize those victims and they foot. What else? So you're really you are intellectual, if you wish, about things, but you put them in such a rhetoric that you win the day.
So what do you do as a government? So let's look at what the opposition is doing. The headline in the Standard this morning, right? Raila seeks to ride on Ruto's failed pledges. Man hasn't even done 100 days, but we have already called them failed pledges. And this is what Raila is saying with Martha Karua. We are starting these public consultations because people expect something of this government. People are not getting something of this government. So we are going to remind the people that this is a promise that you were made for by these people, made to, and they are not delivering. This is basically going with the same hustler narrative that was being used by Ruto in his campaigns. Look at the state of affairs. Look at the cost of living. Look at the state of your business. This man promised the hustler fund. Have you gotten any money? 500 bob. So how many businesses have you started? This is what they're going to ride on.
It's the same narrative, isn't it?
Same shoe. It's different wearer.
It is. But you know what? You talked about campaign time, politics versus development. Now, you must also know that our own politics is based on the binary concept. It's two. You have two governments, one in power and one in waiting. And those are in the constitution. In parliament, you call them the majority versus the minority. In public, you call them the government and the opposition. And these are legal concepts. Nothing is illegal there. Now, what happens is that if you are an opposition that cannot, color the paper black and white, then people will not see the difference. And that's the problem we have been having in this nonsense of power sharing. Because you are saying you mix a little white and a little black, then what do you get? Some gray. And you could never tell what kind of a government it is. And that's what they call the mongrel. If you remember, that word has been used in our public space. Mongrel, meaning it's a dog whose breed you cannot tell. I mean, really, this is what they're saying. Now, the point is, power sharing blurs the difference between the opposition and the government. And the more, the harder the opposition is, the more it entrenches itself in its place. I have no problem with what Raila Odinga is saying at all. I have no problem with what Mother is saying, because they've got to carve the niche as an opposition. And I think that's what Ruto said they be, that I want an opposition holding me to account. Now, I think what we are going to be asking is, what tools is the opposition using to entrench itself and to be effective? And that's why I was saying, I think we need to change the tune. It's very clear. Previously, the opposition was doing what it was doing, going to the streets, mobilizing its support and so on, in order to get a share of government. Now, you have to know that it is not a share of government you'll get. It is election in 2027. Therefore, you have to project yourself as a government. That is the concept of two governments, one in power, the other one in waiting.
What I've always found interesting is when we talk about politics, and this unholy mixture is referred to as a mongrel. When bees move from one plant to the other, doing the very same thing, we call it cross-pollination. And yet, what is produced, if you're talking about ecology, you say, it's wonderful. If you are talking about genetics, you say the genes are made stronger when you mix them up. Now, what is wrong with a mongrel? What if the mongrel works? It may not follow the laid down procedures of what we have understood politics to be, or what we've understood democracy to be. What if this mongrel is introducing us to a hybrid, something different, something that perhaps the world of politics...
The future of dogs.
Yes, exactly. A survivor.
I didn't think that we were going to talk about dogs today.
No.
But here we are.
You see, I am looking at our politics and I'm saying this.
Yes.
With all the problems that we have, can we not look at our politics and say, we are actually introducing a new idea, a new concept into the way politics is actually worked on, the way politics works. Because the discussion is against a backdrop of what the ideal situation is. Now, if you look at the West, they have mongrel systems. Mongrel systems are coalitions. That's what they are. You create a situation where there isn't one party that dominates all, and for a good reason. But you have many people coming together. So the check and balance is already created within that association.
Well, I hear what you're saying, that we live in a society where we vote as individuals and the vote is counted as collective, as communities.
Yes.
How the Kikuyu voted, how the Luos voted, how the Somalis voted, all that kind of thing. When in essence we spend about $25 to ensure that each Kenya vote, and the vote is protected individually. Meaning, we derive our concepts of democracy, including inclusivity and other concepts that go with that democracy, liberal democracy. We derive it from, philosophically, from Western idea of individualism, which is, I am because I am, and because I am, therefore we are. Now, we are coming from a philosophical heritage where we say we are And because we are, therefore,
Yes.
I am.
Yes.
No, so we are living at an age when philosophically we are in a crashing world where the way we think, the way we are brought up, the way we take care of ourselves. Who among us doesn't have a sister in their house or a brother in their house as they're looking for their jobs? Who among us is not paying school fees, or a cousin? Who among us is not feeding that grandmother of your other, father, uncle's father? I mean, it's none of us. It's the truth. This is what Tom Boyer was telling us, that when people in the 1960s started debating these two concepts of socialism versus capitalism, and Boyer told them, this is nonsense. Come to my house tonight and you see who is there. You tell me whether I'm a capitalist or I'm a socialist. so it's very clear that we are walking on our feet. On our head rather than on our feet. That's true as Africans, because our philosophy is consensus. We don't have this idea of crash. What they call without complicating the debate. What they call dialectics. That where something has to fight, so that when they fight, then you bring a bigger thing, and
then the outcome is
yes, and therefore conflict becomes the motor of development, which is not true. That's not how the African is wired. That's not how the Asian is wired. That's not how This is peculiarly an Anglo-Saxon. It's not even the way the Norwegians are wired or the way the Finns are wired. No, this is an Anglo-Saxon thing. And it is brought by philosophers whose name we know, and how they made it, and how it is now popularized as the way to live in the world, that conflict must be there so that we move on. But it has helped, because you cannot have a car moving if there's no conflict between the tire and the road. So that's how it has defeated our thinking, So we're confused.
Let's take a break.
Yeah.
It's 27 minutes to 9. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's a situation room. Professor Peter Kagwanja is a governance expert, and he's here with us. We're talking about, when is it time to stop politicking and to start governing? Is it about that time, or are we in a continuous, perpetual state of politicking for governance, or governing for politics? Whatever. We'll be back shortly after we take a look at the weather and traffic.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
This is the Situation Room. Professor Peter Kagwanja is our guest, and he's here with us in the studio. Prof, the opposition is doing its thing. And you say you have no problem with what Raila Odinga is saying.
Yeah.
Are you also okay with what Raila Odinga is proposing to do in terms of the public meetings? He says, I want to have public meetings. Just have a conversation with the people. Be visible, be present with the people. And let's talk about this government and what it's not doing. There's the issue of IEBC and all these other issues. Is that there, right? Do you agree with this approach?
Well, I don't disagree with the idea of organizing your opposition. And as I said, the government itself will have the mandate to organize development focus, development councils, and so on. Even platforms like the Hasra Fund, you organize an online platform to deliver the same. I would have a problem with anything, whether it's in Africa or in the US. And this is the problem the Americans are having with Donald Trump. That yes, he's the leader of opposition, but some of the things that he's coming up with, the proposals about raising his profile as a politician, undermine the foundation of the American society. When you talk about terminating the Constitution, what are you talking about? We go back to Pennsylvania, or what are you suggesting people do? Now, so democracy has its remit, and the remit is very simple. Now, you have endless rights within a democracy. That's the principle. But your freedom ends where my rights begin. Right? Therefore, the moment you begin to do things that undermine other people's rights, then you are not within the democratic space. What does that mean? It means, for example, if you call for protests, that's right. call for protest. That's within our democratic purview. But ensure, one, nobody hurts. That two, no property is destroyed. That two, three, nobody's right to go to work and to do what they need to do is stopped. The moment my brother Muga decide that I'm not coming to work today because I'm not sure from my house to my workplace I am safe, then you have basically interfered with the democracy. It's as simple as that. It's not as complicated. Therefore, protest is enshrined in our constitution. Nobody will tell you now that you cannot protest. Who should protest? I think the leader should be the last to use that instrument, because you must always know, as a leader, when do you use the protest? Protest is the nuclear equivalent in the warfare, because it means that you went to parliament, you could not get your rights. You went to the courts, you couldn't get your rights. You went to all the lobbies that are available, including civil society. That could not be achieved. Then what else do you need? And that's where we reached when we poured into the streets against the government of Daniel Moi. Because you say this, you are put in. You say this, you're in committee. You do this in parliament, everybody. You are producing court at 4:59. When the court has only 1 minute to go. Then you had
on a Friday.
On a Friday. Now, so then you had no option. So we poured into the street and did that.
It was nuclear.
It was because we had gotten to the nuclear option of our war. Now, after we gained our freedom in 2002, we started pedaling back into normal life. And by now, we should be settling to normal life. Settling to the normal life that I was in opposition. I was in the government side, as Azimio side, and we lost squarely not because we had the deep state, we had everything, and we had the money. We had the money. Let's be clear about it. If we didn't have it in government, we had it in private. If we are buying one plate, 1 million per plate, in order to fundraise for getting out the vote, then we are doing well. But the democracy being what it is, we lost. So now we got back to the drawing board and ask the fundamental question: how do we systematically go to challenge this government without going to the ways that are
unleashing the nuclear?
Yeah, unleashing the nuclear. So for a politician. But for an ordinary person, let's make this distinction very clear. For an ordinary person who feels aggrieved by democracy, has talked to their representatives, members of parliaments, MCAs, and they're not giving them answers. They have talked to everybody they can talk to, including the church, and something is not working, then demonstrations and protests become a right option. At that time, it's not the nuclear option. Because for the ordinary people, revolution is a nuclear. Yes, for ordinary people, and they are the ones who choose their leaders. That's why you find revolutionaries are not one of what you can call very educated people. The Kimadis were not professors, and so on and so forth. Because it is coming from the people. It is spontaneous. It's from below. But for a politician, protest is the nuclear option. Because you are now calling the people, you're inciting your people, your followers, to come out and do the inevitable. Is this the time for protest in Kenya? Not yet. We've not even hit 100 days. Is this the time for demonstrations in the streets? Not yet. We have not even concretized the agenda that's going to pour out into the streets. So it's not necessary, if you wish.
How do we know that it's time to protest?
When you have exhausted the avenues available, and the response is draconian. That's the test, and everybody feels it. In Mount Kenya, when Rubia and Matiba came out, and these are the wealthiest amongst that region's people, then we knew that the end has come. There is no turning back. Very many people had protested that Godo karaoke, Merugi, whatever, Nganga, Mukaru Nganga. Many people had protested for over a decade. But when
When they
Matiba and Rubia came out, then they said that the end has come.
The direction in which one would hope that a nation was going is that you're graduating from a place of infanthood and then you're actually going towards adolescence and then adulthood in the race towards development. That's the hope, that's where the progression is. Do you think that these agitations that we see along the way are contributing towards this governance concept that we're talking about? That you're in a constant state of politicking to hope that you will get to a desired end. That we politic in the manner in which we do so that many things will come about. One of the things, for example, is electoral reforms. One would hope that truly, if we were really interested in making sure that electoral reforms take place in this country, those are the things that we would target. Then if we talk about the development, the health, the education of our children, the health of our people, mitigating factors, the drought, for example, that some of us seem to have forgotten is still ongoing in this country. As we look at these factors and the agitations that we see politically, would one not hope that it's kind of like a ball that's rolling, but it's also turning on its axis? But either way, we are making some kind of headway towards a desired goal. Is that all right? What we see, is it okay? Can we still do that? Or do we say, stop it, put all the philosophical agenda aside, and let's just get down and do the work? Because then one would say that the way in which we see things happening today, that the opposition operates in the manner it does because we're still chewing on sour grapes and is not really vested in the proper governance and development of this country. Is it all right, the agitations that we see? Is it taking us somewhere?
There are two questions that we ask in life. The first question is what? And the second question is how. The question what is about the end, what we want to achieve. And I think that's what you're speaking to. And the next question is how do we reach there? And that's what we are now debating here. Because we all know what we want in Kenya. One, we want Kenyans to be free. We don't want to go back to some of the conditions we found ourselves in. Because in freedom, I can actualize and realize my dreams. But at the same time, we want a government that is working, a government that delivers on areas of health, education for our children, and also provides the amenities that we need to live day by day, water, electricity, and so on. So we know the ends. And the old men of the 1960s were cleverer than we were. They did not go to complicated kind of debate that I would bring onto this platform about dialectics and all. They talked about one thing called poverty, ignorance, and disease. These are the mortal enemies of our people. They were as simple as that and very clear in their minds. So eliminating poverty, ignorance, and disease. Now, and when you're doing that, when you now begin to debunk what you mean by ignorance, then you find technical education lies there, other education lies there, somewhere Gubaro for the old ones, and all. So you can debunk it. So we know the ends, so we know what. What we have disagreed on in this country for, donkey years is how. And we are caught at this question of how because ideologically we come from different perspectives or different directions. There are those of us who come from the revolutionary background that you think in order to achieve something, you must be defined as revolutionary. So you hear people, colleagues of mine in the intellectual world talking about we the progressives versus the others. like we the progressives. Progressives, the problem therefore is not what, it is how. And this is where we are today. Now, if I was where Raila Odinga is today, the first thing I would have done is to create my shadow cabinet. The second thing I would ask is, I want a conversation with Dr. William Ruto on where my office as the leader of opposition is. Where is my office? I need that towering place. You have a state house, your deputy has another state house,
Your chief
and
minister
the ministers
railways.
have these offices. Where are my ministers the shadow ministers, because this government provides for shadow cabinet. Then I would be asking, now for my shadow cabinet to do the work it's supposed to do, including my secretariat, the people around me, what are they going to depend on? So you are asking for resources to be an effective opposition. Because that's what our constitution demands.
And the
an
president
effective,
has said, I want an effective
yes.
opposition.
So can you have that? Now, power has PO box, post office address. If you don't have a post office address, then you have no power. And therefore, if you are a leader of opposition where people cannot wake up in the morning and find you, then you have no power. That's why you keep on talking about Kamukunji. You keep on talking about Kibera. You keep on talking about, because these are the only post office addresses that people know that are shared. Give us an opposition that has teeth. And then let's move from there. If this government doesn't deliver or on its agenda, then we are simply taking advantage of that, and the public can see. When come 2027, they will vote the way they vote.
But then, unfortunately, Prof, yes, it makes a lot of sense to say, organize this way. Ask for this facilitation for the members of your shadow cabinet, for the opposition, blah, 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 blah. But our system doesn't recognize that. Our system sees one parliament that holds the executive to account. And that parliament has minority and majority. And that parliament has provided the office of minority leader, the office of deputy minority leader, the office of minority whip, and the others. So there's that. Ruto can basically just tell Raila, go and ask the speaker.
No, that's understood. But remember, you and I were in this country in 2007 when the national madness overtook us, and we were on each other's, neck. I was in Kibaki government as an advisor, and remember the debates we were having, and said, the people are making a legitimate case. This imperial presidency seems to be having the power to do everything. And therefore, if you drive from Nairobi to Rodwa, you find spaces of government and spaces of the opposition on the road. The ones of the government have no potholes, the ones of opposition have potholes. It was very clear, even on the roads. Then we said, Kenyans need to feel they have something. That's how devolution was born. It has not reached its optimum because it needs to have resources that make sense, and two, that those resources are protected from corruption and other mishandling. But essentially, the principle was let people have their own spaces and manage their own development. The government concentrate on policy. On the overall, the war against the three enemies of our people, ignorance, poverty, and disease. That's the government. Now, it is possible to tell William Ruto, and he will listen, this I can tell you, he'll listen, that we need an opposition with the teeth. So that if Professor Kagwanja is not consulting for William Ruto, I can consult for Raila Odinga, and Raila Odinga pay me as an expert. Right? About GMO, about other things affecting our place. I can review the Hasra Fund on behalf of Raila Odinga and the opposition, and be paid and put food on the table for my children without necessarily feeling that I'm serving
public funds.
Yes, without I'm misusing public funds. So by just going to Kamukunji, let me make this very, very simple. By just going to Kamukunji, which has no PO box in terms of our democracy, you have denied livelihoods to millions of us.
Maybe he's basically going the same route you're taking, but he's gone through a different road.
No, but I cannot be employed in Kamukunji.
Going to Kamukunji is
I'll not
one
be
way
employed
of
in
having a
Kamukunji.
conversation with William Ruto.
Yeah.
You know what? I need a place. The reason why I'm in Kamukunji is because I don't have a PO box. If you want me not to come to Kamukunji, then provide
me a
for me.
place.
a
But that
PO
is
box.
not what is taking him there. First things first. Do you want the gown?
How do you know?
Do you want the gown? Or do you want the drama around it?
How do you get the girl without the drama?
But you have to say
There
that
has to be that thing. The gates are closed and the women on the other side are singing.
Yes.
May
And-
Shoka do that.
and the connections.
Something has to make the door open.
Yes. But you see, there is somebody among this drama. There's somebody who is quiet somewhere with his either leather jacket or whatever he chose to go with this time, who is sitting there and quietly saying, do it for me because I need that girl. You have to indicate what it is you want at that material time.
But there's something that brought you there. You know what it is.
Yes.
You
So
already know what it is that has brought you to that gate. The people on the other side who are singing
Also
know what
know.
you want.
and they also know what they want from you. Because
Yes.
you cannot just get a girl for nothing.
Yep.
Therefore, politics is simply like that. It's not a negotiation, it's a struggle, but you have to make your objectives very clear. For me, the 100 days after the election, I wanted to see a functioning opposition with what I have mentioned. A Kadu cabinet. Remember, Ruto just managed to swear his PSs
Yep.
the day before yesterday. By now, we should be having the technical people who are going to help the opposition.
But Professor, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Does our constitution allow for what you're suggesting?
Yes, it does. We are based on the concept of two governments.
Yes, we are.
Yes, and we have the majority leader. Leader in parliament. What we did not do, and this was our mistake when we were making the new constitution, we did not provide for the leader of the party, the presidential candidate, who was in the majority, to come to parliament. Because like now, Raila should be speaking in parliament about what he wants to do or what he wants to be done. Now, that platform is not there. Why? We don't have that PO box. So the PO box he has is Kamukunji, Kibera, and Nakuru, Fraha Stadium and other stadiums. So the point is, let's not lose the fundamental. At this age in our time, as a country, the biggest challenge is that we can go back to the protest politics of the 1990s, or we can stabilize our democracy by institutionalizing it, and only coming out of institution if the leadership become draconian. And you see that. That is how the Americans did it. When Trump became too much for them, they used the media was one of the spaces. The houses were some of the spaces, and in the public, those who are in the intellectual world, journals and other publications, and they got lead of Trump that way. And the people came out of the streets, the Black Lives Matter, that campaign itself. So there is always a way in which we can protect
There's a
our
way to go
democracy.
it.
Yeah, but
I put it to you, Professor. The way you've said it, I'm actually hearing it. Probably Raila and Karua have tried going to Ruto via the political advisors, and they have seen this will not work. So they're going to Ruto via their other advisors.
I don't
Security advisors, for example, look at national security. These demonstrations have an effect on national security. Probably, Mr. President.
But we have that agenda on the table. I'm looking for it.
That's
because
the question.
I have been debating with my colleague, Makau Mutua. We were on the same political side. And saying, you start by basically bastardizing the system we are trying to build by calling it fake. Right? Then after you call it fake, you want to now prescribe how to deal with the fake democracy, which is basically to take people to Kamukunji, and then enter what Mahatma Gandhi was called, positive action across the thing. Have you used our institution? Yes, the hustlers dominate parliament, they dominate Senate, they dominate government, but they did that as we watched. It was.
Yes, they did, Professor, but also consider that when the campaigns were on for this very presidency that we now have, we still had the deputy president who was in effect functioning as the opposition. He was still the deputy president of the country.
Yes, an opposition.
And he had been part and parcel of the decision-making process of very many things that happen in government, and consistently presented himself as though he was an outsider. In a government, he was still the deputy president of. I'm referring to our politics and the way we operationalize our politics.
Which is different.
Yes.
It's always a pleasure having you.